The summer sun beat down on the quiet hills of rural Oregon, but Daniel Rivers felt none of its warmth. Inside him, a storm raged. His son had just turned 2, and instead of balloons or laughter, the house was painfully silent. There would be no party, no gathering of family or friends. Just a small, quiet home with too many unspoken fears hanging in the air. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly as he drove down a narrow country road. His mind had been spinning for weeks. He had to do something, anything to bring back some light into their lives. Not for himself, but for Liam, his 2-year-old son, who had never known what it felt like to stand, to run, or even to take a single step. Liam had been born after a difficult labor, one that left him paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors had said it gently, with practiced sorrow. He may never walk. Those words haunted Daniel every day. Still, he clung to hope, thin and fragile, that perhaps something or someone could help his little boy. That's when the idea came to him, a therapy dog. He had read articles, seen stories about how animals could do what medicine sometimes couldn't. They could awaken joy, inspire movement, heal the heart in ways science couldn't explain. Maybe, just maybe, a dog could reach Liam where nothing else had. Daniel didn't tell his wife, Emily. She had barely spoken in weeks, swallowed by grief and postpartum depression. He knew she might not approve, but he had to try. So he kept driving past the fields and barns until he reached the county shelter. Today, he wasn't just a father. He was a man on a mission to save his son, and maybe, in the process, save his family. The county shelter was a modest building tucked behind a grove of oak trees, its fencing lined with eager barks and wagging tails. As Daniel stepped inside, the air buzzed with movement, paws scratching against concrete, dogs leaping up against their enclosures, each one desperate for attention. He paused, scanning row after row of hopeful faces. He didn't know what he was looking for, not exactly, but he would know when he saw it. And then he did. In the last kennel, almost hidden in the corner, sat a large German shepherd with deep amber eyes. He wasn't barking, wasn't pacing, just watching Daniel quietly, head slightly tilted, ears alert. There was no chaos in him, just a calm, curious presence. Something stirred in Daniel's chest. He walked over and crouched down. "Hey there, buddy," he whispered. The shepherd took a cautious step forward, then another, eventually placing his nose against the fence. Daniel reached out and touched the cold metal. There was no explosion of excitement, no frantic licking or jumping, just a slow, steady wag of the tail. That was enough. A volunteer approached. "That's Rex," she said. "He came in a few months ago. We think he used to belong to a retired vet. He's steady, observant, quiet, but fiercely loyal." Daniel nodded, hardly listening. He was already imagining Liam's tiny hands reaching out to touch that thick fur. He had read about how large breeds like German shepherds could serve as emotional anchors, providing not just companionship but stimulation and structure. They were protectors by nature and teachers in their own way. "This is the one," Daniel said. The adoption process took a bit of time. Paperwork, signatures, a small donation. But through it all, Daniel's heartbeat was something it hadn't felt in months. Hope. As he walked Rex to the truck, the big dog padded alongside him, calmly matching his stride. It felt like a beginning, not just of pet ownership, but of something greater. A partnership that might change everything. Daniel still remembered the moment Liam was born. Not because it was joyful, but because it was terrifying. The delivery room, once filled with anticipation, had fallen eerily silent after Emily's final push. There was no immediate cry, just the hurried shuffle of nurses and the tense murmuring of the obstetrician. When Liam finally let out a fragile wail, Daniel's knees gave out, his heart crashing with relief. But it was short-lived. They weren't allowed to hold him. Instead, Liam was whisked away to the neonatal unit for tests. Daniel caught only a glimpse, a tiny reddish face, a wiggling hand, before the door closed. That image haunted him for weeks. Later that night, a doctor came in with eyes too practiced in giving bad news. "There's been trauma to the lower spinal cord," he said gently. Your son's spine was compressed during delivery, severely. Daniel heard the rest through a fog, paralysis from the waist down, little to no sensation in the legs, a low probability of walking, but not impossible, not impossible. That phrase became his mantra. He clung to it like a life preserver. Emily, however, was drowning. The once vibrant, witty woman he married had gone silent, hollow. She wouldn't speak of the diagnosis, wouldn't hold Liam for more than a few seconds. She had no energy for the physical therapy sessions Daniel insisted on, sometimes even refused to get out of bed. Postpartum depression, the counselor had said, complicated by guilt. Emily blamed herself, no matter how many times doctors assured her there was nothing she did wrong. Daniel tried to juggle everything, working long hours to cover Liam's mounting medical costs, then coming home to care for both his son and a wife who barely spoke. Some nights, he'd just sit in the hallway outside Liam's room, listening to his soft baby coos, and wondering how everything had gone so far off course. Hope was hard to hold on to, but he did, because Liam needed him to, and Emily, though she didn't say it, needed him too. The sun was beginning to set as Daniel pulled into the driveway. A modest chocolate cake balanced on the passenger seat, and Rex calmly seated in the back. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small gesture to mark Liam's second birthday. A quiet celebration for a boy who had already endured more than most. He opened the front door with cautious excitement. Emily stood in the hallway, her arms crossed, her face tired, her eyes guarded. "You brought home a dog?" she asked flatly. Daniel gave her a soft smile. "His name's Rex. He's gentle, trained. I thought maybe he could help Liam." "Help?" she repeated with a bitter laugh. "So now I'm supposed to take care of a baby and a dog while you work 10 hours a day?" Her words stung more than he expected, but Daniel stayed calm. He knew this wasn't really about the dog. "I've already arranged for Maria, the housekeeper, to help with Rex in the mornings," he explained. "You won't have to do anything you don't want to, but I thought Liam deserved something special today." Emily didn't respond. She simply took the cake from his hands and disappeared into the kitchen. Daniel sighed, then turned toward the nursery. He found Liam in his crib, clutching his worn stuffed giraffe and babbling softly to no one. The sight made his chest ache. He lifted the boy gently and brought him into the living room. Rex followed, his paws nearly silent on the hardwood floor. As Daniel sat Liam down on a soft blanket, Rex lowered his body slowly, lying down beside him. Liam stared at the large dog, wide-eyed. Then, to Daniel's surprise, he giggled, reaching out a tiny hand. Rex didn't move, just wagged his tail once. It was a start, a small one, but Daniel would take it. The days that followed were filled with quiet observation. Rex wasn't like other dogs Daniel had owned in his youth. He didn't bark for attention or chase after every toy thrown his way. Instead, he moved with a calm purpose, always aware of where Liam was, watching, waiting, almost listening. Every morning, Daniel made sure Rex had food and fresh water before heading off to work. Maria, their housekeeper, helped during the day, but Rex seemed to know his role went beyond daily care. He rarely left Liam's side. At first, Emily stayed distant. She barely looked at the dog, and when Rex would nudge her hand gently for attention, she'd pull away. But even she couldn't ignore the shift in Liam. The boy who once lay still for hours now began to show bursts of energy. He'd laugh when Rex wagged his tail or dropped a toy in front of him. He started waving his arms wildly, babbling in excited gibberish every time the dog entered the room. His babbling had started forming actual words, and every time he saw Rex, he'd shout, "Doggy!" with a bright smile. One afternoon, as Maria folded laundry in the hallway, she heard Liam's unmistakable giggle echoing from the living room. Peeking inside, she found him lying on his stomach, slapping the floor in joy, while Rex lay beside him, his large head resting between his paws, eyes alert and content. That evening, something unexpected happened. Daniel had just set down his bag when he heard Emily call from the living room, not urgently, but with a strange tremble in her voice. "Daniel, come here." Slowly, he walked in, unsure of what to expect, and froze. Liam was on the floor, propped up slightly against a pillow, his eyes locked on Rex, who lay just a few inches away. The dog had gently nudged a small toy into Liam's lap, and then, with slow, uncertain effort, Liam began to push himself upright. His arms trembled, his core wobbled, and his face contorted in fierce concentration. But inch by inch he straightened. No one helped. No one dared to move. Daniel fell to his knees. Emily's hands were clasped over her mouth, eyes wide and glistening. Finally, slowly, Liam sat up on his own, unassisted, completely upright. Rex let out a low, approving huff, as if he had been waiting for this moment too. Liam turned to him, placed one tiny hand on the dog's head, and giggled. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. His son, the boy they were told might never move below the waist, had just defied that fate in front of their eyes. Emily knelt beside Daniel, tears now freely falling. "It's happening," she whispered. Daniel couldn't speak. He could only nod, one hand resting on Liam's back, the other on Rex's fur. It wasn't just movement. It was a miracle, a quiet, sacred moment of triumph, the kind that stays with you forever. The bond between boy and dog was forming, slowly, surely, and stronger than he could have imagined. For the first time in months, the silence in the house felt less heavy. It was being replaced by laughter, by movement, by something that looked suspiciously like joy. For the first time, hope wasn't just a fragile thought. It was something they could see, touch, and hold. And with it came change. Over the next few weeks, Daniel began noticing changes. Not grand, sweeping breakthroughs, but small, beautiful shifts that felt like the beginning of something bigger. Liam's posture had improved. He no longer slumped to the side when sitting. Instead, his back grew stronger, more stable. He laughed more. Belly laughs that echoed through the halls, often provoked by Rex doing nothing more than wagging his tail or dropping a slobbery ball at his feet. At physical therapy, the doctors were cautiously optimistic. Liam's core strength had increased. He could balance upright for longer stretches, and when encouraged, he began scooting forward on the floor, using his arms and upper body. "He's pushing himself harder," one of the therapists said. "It's like he's motivated by something new." Daniel smiled. He didn't need to guess what that something was. Back home, Rex was more than a pet. He was a living milestone chart. The dog would nudge Liam's favorite toy just out of reach, then sit patiently as the boy pulled himself forward to retrieve it. Every small victory became a game. Every inch Liam gained was met with an excited bark and a wagging tail. Emily too had changed. She began sitting with them during playtime, laughing when Liam babbled nonsense to Rex, or clumsily tried to feed him from his own cereal bowl. Her smiles came more freely now. She had even resumed attending Liam's therapy sessions, not just watching from the corner, but engaging, asking questions, taking notes. One afternoon, as Liam managed to scoot clear across the living room in pursuit of a ball, Rex had gently rolled away. Emily turned to Daniel, eyes glistening. "I never thought I'd see this," she whispered. Daniel didn't say anything. He just reached for her hand and held it tight. Because he hadn't either. And yet here it was. Not a miracle in the traditional sense, but something just as powerful. The quiet, steady return of hope, 1 inch at a time. It was a rare, quiet Saturday morning. The air was cool, the sky overcast. A soft kind of stillness had settled over the Rivers' home. Daniel sat on the porch, coffee in hand, flipping absently through a paperback. For once, there were no appointments, no therapy sessions, no errands, just the comfort of routine. Inside, Liam and Rex were in the living room, playing their usual morning game of roll the ball and chase it. Daniel could hear Liam's muffled voice, a mix of babbling and squeals, and the occasional thump of Rex's tail hitting the floor. Then came the bark. Not a playful yip, but sharp, urgent. Daniel's head snapped up. He stood quickly, the book dropping to his lap. Rex didn't usually bark like that unless something was wrong. He called out, "Everything okay in there?" But got no response. Another bark, then a series of them. Fast, demanding, insistent. Daniel rushed inside, his heart beginning to pound. As he turned the corner into the living room, he stopped cold. Liam was standing. Not propped up, not holding onto furniture, just standing. He was wobbly, knees slightly bent, arms stretched forward like a tightrope walker, but he was on his own 2 feet. His face was a mixture of focus and pure joy. And beside him, like a soldier on watch, stood Rex, alert, steady, unmoving. Daniel's knees buckled and he had to grab the doorframe to keep from collapsing. "Liam," he whispered. The boy turned, saw his father, and his expression fell slightly. "Daddy sad?" Daniel laughed through the tears streaming down his face. "No, buddy, I'm happy. I'm so happy." Rex gave a low bark, as if to confirm what had just happened. Liam giggled and took a small, shaky step toward Daniel before plopping onto the floor. It didn't matter. He had stood on his own for the very first time. Daniel scooped him up, pressing his son tightly to his chest, heart thundering. Moments later, Emily came running, hair still damp from her shower. When she saw Liam in Daniel's arms, the tears in his eyes, and Rex wagging excitedly by their feet, she froze. Daniel looked at her and whispered. He stood, and together, they cried. The kind of cry that only comes when fear finally begins to loosen its grip. After that morning, everything changed. It wasn't that Liam suddenly began walking around the house or running into his parents' arms. No, progress still came in inches, not miles. But the energy in the house had shifted, like someone had cracked open a window and let hope pour in. Rex had always been calm, but now he became purposeful, as if he sensed the weight of what Liam had just accomplished and knew his role had deepened. Emily began spending more time on the floor with them, encouraging Liam to try again, to stand, to lean, to balance. And Rex, always patient, would position himself right beside the boy, a living, breathing support bar. Liam would press his hand into Rex's back for stability, giggling as he swayed, sometimes falling, sometimes not. One afternoon, while Daniel was preparing lunch, he heard Emily's voice from the living room, filled with excitement and disbelief. "Daniel, come here now!" He rushed in, his heart in his throat, and there it was. Liam was taking a step, just one, then another. His little legs shook, his arms flailed, and his whole body leaned heavily into Rex's side. But he was moving forward, one tiny step at a time. His eyes locked on Emily's open arms just a few feet away. Rex matched his pace. Slow, careful, perfectly measured. He didn't pull or flinch. He simply walked beside his boy, every muscle poised, every glance focused. When Liam finally stumbled into Emily's lap, she let out a sob and held him tight, rocking gently while whispering, "You did it." Daniel dropped to his knees and pulled them both close. Rex sat beside them, panting, tail thumping softly against the floor, as if he understood the moment. In a way, he did. That evening, they didn't need a party or cake. The celebration was quiet, just the 3 of them sitting on the floor, Rex lying across their legs, Liam babbling in triumph, as if he knew he had crossed a line no one believed he could. Not long ago, Daniel had feared they'd never see a day like this. Now, he couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. Months passed, and Liam kept improving. He could now walk short distances with minimal help, often clinging to Rex's thick fur like a toddler holding onto a sturdy railing. Every step was still shaky, but no longer impossible. Emily had changed too. The darkness that once clouded her gaze had faded. She laughed more, hugged tighter, and no longer avoided mirrors or memories. She was present, fully, lovingly there. One evening, as Daniel watched his son toss a toy across the yard and Rex sprint after it, he felt a quiet ache of gratitude swell in his chest. This wasn't just a recovery. It was a rebirth. For Liam. For Emily. For all of them. Rex had come into their lives as a dog, but he had become so much more. A healer. A guide. A silent warrior who carried their hopes on 4 steady legs. Daniel knelt beside him, buried his hand in that warm fur, and whispered, "Thank you, boy. You gave us our family back." Rex looked up, tail thumping once, eyes calm and knowing, as if he already understood.